Welcome to another episode of The Common Theory, you guys. My name is Chris, and I'm here with my man Dallas. And today we have our guest, Bobby. Bobby is the individual that has won the most recent Riches to Rags CPDH tournament. I won't be very much involved today, you guys. This is kind of going to be between the two of them. You know, we have the essential Gretchen pilots here with us, so they're going to be pretty much the two of them kind of going back and forth, discussing the deck as a whole, really getting in their minds so we could see what this archetype has to offer and really, hear it straight from them, which I think is going to be very enlightening for all of us. So definitely, let me just pass it off to you, Dallas.
Sure. So, Bobby, you played Gretchen Titchwillow for the tournament at Riches to Rags. How do you feel about the deck in general?
So Gretchen is sweet. Not that that's a surprise to you. Yeah, I mean the deck does broken things. It can win really fast. It can grind out games. It can survive some aggression. It can interact with combos. It does a little bit of everything, while also kind of flying under the radar just because of how unfamiliar some people may be with the combos. But yeah, no, the Gretchen is a blast to play.
Yeah, for everyone who's not aware, Gretchen is just a hardcore Simic combo deck, and it's a deck that I've put a decent amount of work into, and now we have Bobby piloting it in a tournament. Jonathan's also put some work into the deck. It's pretty fun. I saw your list, and it was a couple cards different from the list that's been on the database, but it's pretty similar. Looks like you cut some Mystic Sanctuary redundancy for a bit more interaction. Was there any specific reason for that?
Yeah, so I cut Trinket Mage and Expedition Map. Trinket Mage only had 2 targets in the deck, so it was kind of an underwhelming hit. I wasn't excited about playing. Expedition Map's fine. It can find Mystic Sanctuary. It can find Growth Chamber. Those are fine to get, but they're not like plan A's ever. So I thought I'd rather just have more interaction. I added a Spell Pierce and an Into the Royal, I believe. I was on the fence. Like Into the Royal I wanted just because it's a generic answer to whatever it needs to answer. And then Spell Pierce, I was deciding between Spell Pierce and Tangle for that last slot. And in the event Discord, I saw a few people mention playing Malcolm or Tadiova, and I was like, well, I'd rather have Spell Pierce against those decks than a Tangle. So that's why I made that choice.
Yeah, Spell Pierce definitely helps in those combo heavy metas. So, what was the specific reason, if any, for you choosing Gretchen for this tournament?
So I was up in the air on what I wanted to play up until like the day before the tournament. Honestly, I was Gretchen. I knew would be kind of like unexpected, maybe not unexpected, but not well understood. Just because there aren't a ton of people playing it. Even though you've done well with it, there's just not a lot of people playing it to show people how it works. It can win really fast. It can win really, long drawn out games. You don't need a lot necessarily to go off. And you have a lot of interaction, which is nice. You can play fog, you can play counter spells, you can play bounce. So you're really interactive in ways that, maybe other combo decks aren't. There were 90-minute rounds, so I was definitely going to play a deck that could win fast, or like once it was comboing, it didn't take a billion years to execute the combo. But yeah, I thought it would be a good, like, all around, good against combo, good against mid range, good against aggro, or at least has game against all of them. Maybe not always the best matchups.
Chris, I know you're pretty big on the 90-minute timer stuff, working on the tournament legal decks. You got any input on tournament stuff?
Well, I mean, I think it kind of swayed a few of the people's options personally, whether it did or not. I haven't had the opportunity to speak to many of them at this point, but personally, I do believe it sways people's opinions generally on a deck that can win within the time frame. And with the knowledge of them going in with 90-minute rounds, Bobby kind of said it himself just now. He was like, I needed a deck to win within this time limit. And I know we were talking before, Bobby. You said that wasn't at all a big deal for you, right? You were able to play games between rounds from what we were seeing on camera and whatnot. Like, that's kind of really cool, in my opinion.
Yeah, the 90. There are only 2 draws throughout the whole tournament, so most games are getting done pretty quickly. We may talk about this more a little bit, but there's quite a few combo decks, so that helps. People are winning quickly. There were a handful of mid-range decks and some more aggressive decks too, and those were the decks that were involved with the draws.
Really?
Just not being able to close out the game, or just so much interaction that board stalls just build up and no one can do anything. But yeah, no, I'd say except for that last round before the final table, there were 2 draws, but other than that, we were done early almost every round. So
I mean, being an old-time Magic player, I really appreciate that. As weird as this sounds, I like getting food or a drink between rounds. So, that's like my favorite thing when I get to finish early. I'm like, yes, like, let's go to the gas station, guys. Like, that's when you're having fun with your friends, though, right? But let me ask you one question about a few things, because, like, you were saying there were a few mid-range decks, a few aggro, a few combo. Like, were you happy to see certain decks over other decks, or like where were you like in those pairings, like in that concept, right?
yeah, so I was initially I was a little concerned about all the combo decks. My first table I sat down across from a Tatiova and a Cormella, and I was like, okay, so this is what we're dealing with today. But the thing I liked and realized as I played through the tournament, playing Gretchen, it's more of an like I said earlier, underplayed or or just people don't realize its combo potential the same way. Like Tatiova has a reputation, Malcolm, red Malcolm decks have reputation. Gretchen doesn't necessarily have that to people who aren't playing as much necessarily, or haven't seen Puzzle play it, or now I've played it a little bit. Like, so I think that took a lot of heat off of me when I was staying at the tables with other combo decks. And then the other combo decks didn't know how to interact with what Gretchen is doing, which was really nice. So yeah, I was definitely happier to see combo decks as the day progressed. If I ever sat down at a table with multiple aggro decks, I figured I wasn't going to have a very good time. But like most of the decks were more mid-range as opposed to a truly aggressive aggro decks. So even those, where I got paired up with a few of those in one table, I was able to hold my own enough.
Yeah, I think Puzzle has expressed similar feelings to that as well during like tournament settings and things like that. Like, it's a little bit more ideal to play against the combo decks because you're kind of not the first to combo. Now, don't quote me on that. I'm not one of the Gretchen people, right? So, like, you guys got to help me out here with that one. But it may be, not trying to combo first, maybe one of the advantages of this deck. Am I wrong with that?
I'll defer to Puzzle, but I will say I was never the first to try to combo off in this tournament. And someone tried to combo off before me every single game I played in. So yeah, I mean, I got the benefit of people having to fight over other people's stuff, or like suggesting other people fight, and then also being able to win out of nowhere with lines that don't involve haste or an untapper surviving a turn, without dying. People didn't know that was possible with this deck with like the Oboro Breeze Caller lines or Strider Harness, and I was able to catch some people off guard too.
Yeah,
Very
the
nice.
deck having ways to get around the haste issue is very nice. But yeah, I think I'm trying to remember who it is. Ken in the CEDH turn, like CEDH scene, was talking about the 4 main ways of how to win in CEDH in terms of combo.
Yes.
And one of them was win after, which is what this deck is really good at, because Gretchen has the longevity to play for the long game, so it can kind of sit there and just go, I'm going to wait for the other combo to try first, and until then, I'm just going to be drawing cards, ramping, building up my board state, and playing interaction. So Gretchen is really good at forcing the other combo deck to go first. But it also has the potential to go really fast if you feel that's what you need at the table, which I think is one of the major strengths of Gretchen.
Yeah, the whole idea that you intentionally want to leave mana up every turn to activate Gretchen just lets you like you can interact with everyone. Everyone's scared at all times, because you have lots of mana untapped, and you can even if you don't have anything in the hand, you can draw plenty. So it definitely is scary for other combo players sitting across from it too.
I mean, it sounds like you guys are selling me on the deck. I'm already sold, guys. I'm already sold. I'll play it. I'll play it. Okay, I'll play it. We're here now. I got this. Um, so do you have any other random questions here, Dallas? I have a weird one because I think it's very important overall. But you have anything to follow up with there?
This might be the same question that you're thinking of, but how were the politics at the tables that you were playing at, Bobby? Were they heavy politics? Were you politicking hard?
Uh,
Oh, 1 second, Bobby. Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to throw this out there that yes, that is exactly what I was getting to. Because I think that the conversations at the table are very important, right? Like the politics and how you politic. Because if you just show up, say, "Oh, I'm going to beat everyone here," that might, that's not happening, right? So I think it's very important, and I don't think we should go. You did a podcast with Ryan from Common Connoisseurs, so they could see all the gameplay and all that kind of stuff that you guys went through over there. But we're kind of not going to touch upon like all that kind of stuff. We're just going to kind of like hit and like this. We could use like the last game, for example, right? And just kind of touch on that table politics, like how you did there specifically.
yeah. So real quick, I'll do a brief overall. But like overall, there was lots of talking at the table. People wanting to know how people combo. Some people, it's their first time playing this in paper. Some people, it's their first time. This might be some like PDH isn't something they play a lot. So understanding how people win, because people are worried and they'll team up to make sure they don't all lose. So yeah, so specifically, I mean, in the last game in the finals, that happened quite a few times. They were talking about, how Tadiovo would win when there was, once the initial Archaeomancer was cast. There's talks about that. They were asking, okay, what do we need to stop from Gretchen? Is the untapper more important? Is the land enchantment more important? Is Gretchen more important? They were having that conversation, talking about how they had seen me win in previous games because I had played with both of them, and then also then talking about what they can do while at the same time having the realization that hey, I'm not going to overcommit to this because I still have to fight you after all is said and done. If we remove Gretchen, I can't expend all my resources just to then immediately, die on the crackback from you. So that led to some interesting situations, especially towards the end of the game. But I mean, people were very talkative, very upfront about what their intentions were, and just trying to understand, how can we work together to stop the combo menace if they weren't combo decks themselves? And I was even having that conversation when it came to Tadiovo. There was a Dawnbringer cleric that was cast that ended up destroying one of my enchantments. And I was telling, I had limited interaction, but them cutting off my mana and really hurt my ability to interact. And I warned them that I was like, hey, Tadiovo, you see an Archaeomancer in play. There's a High Tide or Ghostly Flicker. I don't remember what was in the hand. But that part of the combo is there. You hurting my mana, just make sure you're aware you have something to interact with them. So
did you not play against a few of these players already recently in the day?
Yeah, so I played against everyone at the final table I had played a match with previously throughout the day.
So it wasn't really a surprise what you were trying to do, right? Because you did have you have beaten a few of them already then.
Yeah, so the interesting thing was that I won a different way against all of them, and I lost to Viscopa actually. So Viscopa didn't know what I was doing necessarily. But yeah, I had done the Freed line against one of them. I did the Breeze Caller line against the other. So they weren't, and the one who I used the Breeze Caller line against didn't remember how it worked. So it was that definitely played to my advantage. Having these various ways I could go for the win, and then trying to figure out how to best interact with that was a conversation they were having. So
That sounds like you. I mean, the deck deliberately does these things, right? Like on purpose. Like these are your lines of play. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Dallas, like this is what it's designed to do, right? This is its play pattern.
Yeah, I mean, Gretchen just ramps and then uses those land enchantments as a form of ramp to activate Gretchen multiple times and also uses them as enablers for your combo pieces, all your pieces that untap lands. Personally, I struggle to see how it's terribly complicated, at least with Freed from the Real lines. Aboro Breeze color lines can get extremely convoluted, especially when you're activating Breeze color on the stack on top of itself in response to interaction. It can get really out of hand, but in general, how are the assessments of your combos and your threats, do you think, from the people you played against all day, Bobby?
yeah, I mean, once people saw what I was doing, it's not hard to figure out you're probably on the Freed from the Real lines when you're playing, Wild Growths and market festivals. It's everyone kind of gets what's going on there. Obroa Breeze Color definitely caught people off guard, and I think that's like the trickiest line in the deck. I mean, it's not once you know the math and what you're doing, it's not necessarily complicated. It's just not being familiar with how it works. It does require more pieces than the other combo lines because you have to have that land that taps for so much mana. But overall, like I said, I never comboed off first, so I was pretty unassuming, all things considered. When you're sitting across from Tadiovas who have this reputation of being the boogeyman, or Lay Weaver, Lore Weaver, who are just as scary as Gretchen in a lot of ways. I was never the one that was like the immediate threat. It was always someone else. And then every time I won, it was almost always shortly after someone else went for it, like the same turn cycle. So they knew I was a problem, but someone else was a more pressing problem. So I got to kind of slide under the radar and benefit from that, which is again kind of how Gretchen is built. It's meant to take advantage of that, keep open mana, draw a ton of cards, and then attack when the time is right.
Well, let me ask this weird question, and this is to the both of you guys. I really have to know this, right? I have played against Gretchen way too many times at this point. Dallas here has beat that deck into the ground with me so many times. It's almost absurd at this point. I have found with a few of my different decks, I'll use Dargo Ketis, for example. I typically don't have a good attack going at him because Gretchen's an 0-4, and then all these guys are 2-2s, and I have a bunch of 1-1s. Even though I'm an aggro deck, I'll have to use someone else with my Ketis to get through to get to puzzle to begin with, right? So I don't know if was that scenario common with you throughout the day, or was that like, and I want to actually hear from the both of you, like, is this something that's kind of common with the deck as a whole? Kind of like, the Thrasios being a 1-3, right? Like kind of that syndrome with the, like, help me out here, guys. Is this how it is, or?
So I'll talk about the tournament
Go
experience,
for it.
and you've played like way more overall, so I'll let you jump in after. But yeah, like there weren't a lot of aggressive decks that were attacking at the tournament that I played against, at least. But you could see it in like the last round for sure, where one like there's a third path like class had a bunch of 1-1s, and they were just stonewalled by like my 3 2-2s and my 0-4. And Vizcopa was kind of in the same spot where they'd have to trade their creatures, except for their flyer, which kept getting through and pinging me down. But yeah, I mean it's amusing how like little 2-2 untappers can put up a solid enough wall that stops a lot of the aggression, or threatens to trade with cards, and we're okay trading them. At least I felt okay offering up the trade on them sometimes because we have so much redundancy in the land untapper slot. And then yeah, Gretchen being an 0-4 that you don't even really care if she sticks around all too often is pretty sweet. She's expendable if you need her. She soaks up a lot of damage, and she just dissuades attacks. People, you saw it in the last game. People started going after Tadiova because there were just no blockers. Where I just had a 2-2 and a 0-4, and that was enough to like send the aggression another way.
Mm.
Yeah. I think Gretchen is extremely expendable when she's in play. I have blocked so many Dargos with Gretchen and bought myself a turn,
Yeah.
maybe two, uh, mainly because of you, Chris. But uh,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
even whenever other people play Dargo, it's like cool. I'll just block with Gretchen, take three. Like that's totally worth it for me. And you can just activate Gretchen before she dies, all that stuff. And the 2/2 bodies are very nice. And you've still got like Archaeomancer, not a great blocker, but can help block 1/1 stuff like that. Another question for you, Bobby. How much, if at all, did Gretchen herself get targeted with like targeted removal? Because I've played a few matches where people just kind of don't understand that killing the land untappers is probably the right play, and I'll have Gretchen and a land untapper in play, and they kill the Gretchen, and it's like, that's great for me, but I'm also really upset that you used a removal spell on a completely meaningless creature when you could have saved it for someone else, or my land untapper, right?
Yeah, I it's definitely it happened a little bit. Um, I'd say it happened earlier on in the tournament than it did later. Again, most of it was other people comboing, so there wasn't a lot of removal. There was a lot of bounce, um, and so that kind of did some stuff to mess with what I was trying to do. But for the most part, when people were concerned or when I started to look like a threat, they were having the conversations like, okay, what do we care more about? Do we care more about Gretchen? Do we care more about the untapper? And most of the time, they realized the untapper was what mattered, unfortunately. But she definitely ate a few removal spells that I was happy about at least. So
Yeah, I do prefer my games to have good target priority. Although there is something to be said about targeting Gretchen sometimes, because, it can kind of force you to use that mana now if they're planning to do something crazy in main phase 2 or whatnot. But typically it seems a bit questionable. Let's see if we
Yeah.
have.
I mean, well, I mean, it sounds like you guys had like great conversations throughout the day, though, as a whole. Like, I mean, so I really have to fire that home a little bit because that's kind of like why we go to these events. It's how, like, what makes it more fun for us as a whole. It sounded like, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but it almost sounds like even if you would have lost, you were still happy with your results, which means you had a good time. You spoke to great people. You met some people. You had fun during the games and the matches, which, like, the overall experience was a positive one. And even like the gameplay you're talking about seems like really nice that you guys had the opportunity to talk, really give like threat analysis and stuff like that. So, I mean, maybe I'm coming out of left field here, but what do you think about that, Bobby?
yeah, no, I thought it was awesome. Even if I had lost every round, I would have had a fun time. It would have been worth the trip. I mean, obviously, it was way better winning, but like, yeah, I mean, there was good talks about what people are doing, how if people weren't sure how to assess what is a threat or who is threatening, they're asking questions and there were frank, open conversations about I have this to interact. What can you do? Um, or like how is this person going to win? Are we scared yet? And those were good conversations. It was really cool, meeting people in person that I talked to or played with online for a while and meeting them in person for the first time. Playing paper Magic, I'm used to playing online and digitally and shuffling cards, playing, reading other people's cards, picking them up. I don't know. There's something about playing paper Magic that's great. So it
Oh
was a
yeah.
good time. Everyone was super friendly. That was the other thing I really wanted to note was everyone was super friendly. Everyone was there to have fun. Yeah, it's competitive, but I think that's one of the great things about the kind of CPDH community, and it's similar in the CEDH community too. That everyone's trying to do the most busted things, or the most everyone's trying their hardest to win in these kinds of things. Um, but it's a little different than like the 1v1 kind of constructed formats where it's everyone for themselves. Everyone is still for themselves, but there's a certain like teamwork that has to happen when someone's trying to do their thing. So it led to some really interesting conversations, cool, just like, meeting people, making new friends, and seeing a lot of interesting decks too.
I mean, that's super awesome, dude. Like, I have to throw this out there because, Dallas already kind of threw that out there about the 90-minute, like, time limit thing. And I'm, like, very, very much about that because I think the goal one day would be able to have this, in an F&M style, right? Something along those lines. So the fact that you're relaying to us that your in-person event had a 90-minute time limit and you guys were properly discussing the threats at the table and still finishing within that time limit is very relevant, right? Which means you were able to discuss things, talk through play patterns, and like the board was honest with one another, and yet you specifically still finish early. We can't say that about everyone there, but that's I mean, to me that's fantastic. So
Yeah, going in, I was concerned about slow play. You're talking about 4 people in a game, and the previous Riches to Rags tournament had a lot of draws, from what I was told. So I was sort of worried about that. I was prepared to, be on people about that if needed, but that didn't really come up often. People were pretty, people knew what they were doing for the most part. They weren't slow. And the one thing I like about, multiplayer as compared to 1v1, if someone's being slow, you have a whole table of people who are gonna like kind of get them to get going and kind of hold everyone accountable. So, which is it can lead to tense situations in a 1v1 setting where you have to get like a judge involved, So, I did appreciate that. Everyone was, no one was really playing slow when I was watching or when I was playing with them. It made it a breeze. So.
Something along those lines. I know Chris likes to talk about this a lot for Gretchen specifically, in terms of like how many game actions the deck can take can make it difficult to pilot in a reasonable amount of time. How much did you practice this deck beforehand? If you're able to consistently finish with extra time after the rounds, I have to imagine you put a reasonable amount of time into the deck.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to you a lot for, the last few weeks about the deck. Because obviously I like playing combo decks as much as, if not more than the next guy. And Gretchen's sweet, I've played Tadiova, I've played Malcolm, I try all of them, Scholar of the Ages. But yeah, I mean, the good thing about combo decks is you can goldfish and get a lot of reps in without having to worry about interaction. It's not the same as a mid-range deck where you're reactive a lot of times. You can still kind of simulate that in goldfishing with combo decks too. But yeah, I mean, I goldfished a lot. I sleeved it up. I practiced like going through the combo steps and like, okay, here's how I'm going to win. I talked to you about different situations that I thought could come up and like kind of the more niche scenarios. I know we talked a little bit about your video you put out about it. Just knowing how the cards work, reading the, your breakdown of how the deck works was definitely helpful. But yeah, I mean, I just goldfished it a lot, and I think I played a few games with people beforehand, but not many. So yeah, I mean, just having the reps in and knowing how I need to go about it, knowing, okay, hey, here's what I'm doing once I have infinite mana. Here's the different ways I can shortcut once I have infinite mana. Here's how I show you that once I have infinite mana, I'm not losing. And going through that, knowing how to like shortcut it and talk people through it so they understand it too, was really big.
you got some for him, Dallas, or you mind if I chime in here?
Go
You mind if
for
I
it.
chime in? So, I mean, sounds like you did your homework. Like that's pretty much what I'm hearing. It sounds like you went into this event, studied up, and you used the best resource you could have used, which would be our man here, Dallas, right? Like, he's played this deck a bit more than essentially everyone, right? So I think that's kind of cool. Like, you went in and you did everything, you prepped, you played, you tested, and you used your best resource you could, and the videos and everything. Like it's fantastic to hear like the community being so well with one another and able to like reach out to one another and ask questions and get them answered and kind of like work on those lines. Like I find that to be one of the reasons why I even started Magic back in the day, right? You make friends, you meet people, and this is just kind of showing that like the CPDH community as a whole is we are about this, right? Like I got to hammer that home. I'm sorry to throw that little tidbit in there, but I really enjoy hearing things of this nature, right?
Yeah, no, I mean everyone's really cool. Everyone likes talking about their decks, and a lot of people are open to thoughts on, okay, hey, here's my experience. Want to get your thoughts, and like those ideas being challenged a little bit too. Sometimes I think there's some good feedback there. It's easy to get tunnel vision when you're playing one deck all the time, and like I said, Dallas and I had a few cards different, but the core of the deck isn't going to change, and those few cards can change tournament to tournament, play group to play group. But yeah, having those conversations, and there was some back and forth between him and I about certain cards and things we thought were weak or things we thought are worth trying out. And those are interesting conversations to have with people, and you can only play so much Magic as one person. So getting other people's experiences and hearing how things worked in other games that you may not have been able to be a part of, or in meta games you weren't able to play in, can help shape how you want to approach certain aspects of the deck.
One rabbit hole I kind of want to dig a bit more into now, if it's fine with you, Bobby.
Oh, what do we got? What do we got? I heard rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Okay, what are we getting into now? Look, all right. I'm ready.
I'm gonna talk a bit about
I'm sitting down.
general tournament prep now. Since we started talking about it a bit, and you said you did a lot of gold fishing and got a few games in. Do you think that's something that's more general to combo archetypes, whereas a deck more like mid-range or control might have to play more games than gold fishing, and aggro and combo maybe would be my guess for more of the gold fishing line? Or what do you think about that?
I think it's not necessarily all about gold fishing versus playing games. And that plays a role, and I think the more interactive decks like control mid-range, they're going to want more games under their belt because they're going to want to tailor their removal suites or their interaction suites, their creatures. They're going to have a lot more variability in their answers based on what they're expecting to see. We talked about the few changes I made to Gretchen based on what I changed one or two cards. So there's plenty of wiggle room. I could change more cards. We could change a lot of cards, but at the end of the day, the deck is going to be doing the same thing. Whereas aggro decks, depending on the style of aggro deck, they're going to want to go after one person initially. And that means they have to know what each person is doing. They have to know more about other people's decks than just their own decks too. So they have to have a familiarity with the format and knowing what other people are doing when they're a threat, understanding that. Combo decks have that too, but you also have I can just win, so like I don't care what you're doing kind of situations that can come up. Mid-range aggro, they need to know how to interact with other decks, so they need to see them play out. I think the actual gameplay is going to be huge on those. If not gameplay, at least watching games or seeing games. Control, kind of the same way, familiarity with your deck, whether it's play testing with other people or gold fishing, is just huge. Knowing what's in your deck, knowing what outs you have, knowing the ways you can find your outs depending on the situation is just huge. And so I would, like, if I just picked up Gretchen 2 days before, I wouldn't have done as well, obviously, because I wouldn't have known, okay, here are my tutor targets for Church of Phantasms or Shrine Steward or Merchant Scroll. Here are my wizards in the deck, for wizard cycling. There's plenty of, like, just getting enough familiarity with the deck opens up, so like you just feel so much more comfortable. You're not panicking. You're not like sitting there tanking on how do I find a way to win the same way.
For sure. Make sure you know your deck, people.
I mean, hammer that home. Hammer that home, Dallas. Learn your deck list. Hammer that home.
Especially if you're taking it
Uh,
to a tournament.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. I do agree with a lot of what you're saying there, Bobby. I can't really argue with it. I do have to throw out there though, Puzzle. What's our next subject? What do you got for him now? I mean, I think I should be interviewing the both of you guys, right? Like, okay, so you won this tournament and you won this one. All right, like, are we going back and forth, right? Like what's happening now?
Something like that. So your meta, at least in the tournament, in your experience, was a bit slower and combo mid-rangey, right?
I don't know if I'd say it was slow. Most of the games ended before turn, 10 or 9, but it was definitely there were a lot more combo decks, and a smattering of mid range. There weren't a ton of what I would call aggro decks. There are a few, but not a lot.
So how relevant? I know your list was on Weather the Storm for life gain and Moment's Peace for a fog, right? How relevant did you find those pieces to be in a more combo centric meta?
So, Weather the Storm gained me 27 life one game.
Ooh, damn.
So it did some work, and it definitely kept me alive an extra turn or two. I still lost, but it did work. Moment's Peace in that last game, it was in my hand and in my yard the whole time, so I felt like I had a really good position just having access to that card at that point in the game. It's tough because there are definitely hands where you get them and they're like, if I was sitting across from two Tadiovas and a Malcolm, I'd be pretty sad to be sitting on either of those cards. But it happens. We have plenty of draw that, unless you have both and you're at an all combo pod, you're not going to be super devastated. You have one of them. I don't think I'd ever feel comfortable not playing at least one, if not both of them, just because of, if you are up against aggro, you're going to need them at some point. They are obviously less exciting because most of the combos I can think of would kill you through them no matter what, whether it's combat damage or life totals. They don't necessarily care. So I like having them. I think there's arguments to play more of them depending on what you're expecting. I know we talked about Tangle specifically, which I think is a really good card. But I personally wouldn't want to go too heavy on them because they definitely can kind of get clunky in your hand.
Man, adding more is not what I want to hear.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I don't like combat, and I don't like having the tech against combat. It makes me feel sad, so I don't like putting fogs and life gain in my deck. But at least the card choices is a bit validated by your perspective here.
I think Moment's Peace is definitely way better because you can get rid of it, you can pitch it to things, and it still sits around, depending on graveyard hate that happens. So it's good. I would keep it over Weather the Storm if I was going down to just one.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, the Dallas. Go for it.
I was just gonna say Weather the Storm's in there for like the deck's more like Quesa, where it's not direct combat damage, but it's like effect damage that you have to deal with, and Weather the Storm doesn't do anything. But I agree, I like Weather the Storm a lot more. I know you pitched that in the finals to hand size, I think, which was pretty funny. Pitched a Moment's Peace and just had it sitting in the yard.
I think it was either to a Frantic Search or a hand size. I don't remember it, but yeah, I definitely had to pitch it in it. So.
Well, I mean, it sounds like this is a phrase that I use personally. Is that you never leave home without it, right? Like if you're, I don't want to call it weak, but if you are susceptible to a certain deck, you have to prep for that deck prior, whether you like it or not, right? Like, so it's like one of these things like Sutured Priest, right? Or Suture Priest. You need to have this against your Peregrine Drake decks, right? Your Ghostly Flicker decks. You might not like the card, but you need to play it. Like Stave Off. Like, yeah, I'm throwing out mono white cards for you Simic guys, right? Like, yeah, I'm slamming these mono white cards out here for you guys. Like, we need to stop these flicker combos. We need to stop the freed from the real, right? And it sounds like this is what y'all do too. Like, whether you like a deck or not, you're going to play these cards because it might be problematic for you, so you don't leave home without it, right? That's kind of like one of the old arguments I used to make for Oubliette. It was just like, oh, I'm playing Cathar Commando. Another mono white card, throwing that out there again. But I'm never leaving home without my enchantment destruction, right? Like, I need to stop this. So sounds like that card's pretty good against these Gretchen decks. Is that what you guys are talking about, right? Like, this is what we're doing. So I'm just throwing that out there too. 2 cents.
Yeah.
I'm not the Gretchen player here, so but it sounds like the homework has been done. The deck list sounds absurd. Like, I'm loving everything I'm hearing from you guys. Like, this is just fantastic. So
Yeah, I think to your point of not leaving home without it, if you know you're weak to a deck and you can shore it up a little bit, even by adding 1 or 2 cards, Gretchen, we have the luxury of being able to, muddle the mixture, transmute to find them too in a pinch if needed. We have, Merchant Scroll to get muddle. So we have a few ways to find some of these cards. I'm gonna play, when I have stuff like that, I'm gonna play the kind of silver bullet things I know I'm gonna need. That being said, there are some decks where if I have a really bad matchup and I can play like 1 or 2 cards to like try to shore it up, but I have no way to get access to those cards when I need them, odds are good I'm just gonna like eschew them and just like try to make my deck better at doing the thing it's meant to do. And if I lose to that card, I lose to that card. It happens in 60 card formats where you can only sideboard so much, and if sometimes you just have a bad matchup, so I'm just gonna rock with the original 60 and play what the deck's supposed to do and hope it works out. I think that's fewer. I think it's uncommon in Pauper Commander because there's 3 other people at the table, so you can also sort of rely on some other people interacting and doing stuff too that you don't necessarily have to play all the answers all the time.
So can I ask both of you guys, like, and I want Dallas to start with this one. I want to hear his opinion, and then I want to shoot over to you because, like, this seems really relevant for you guys and for people in the future that want to even pick this deck up as a whole, right? So, what do you not want to play against? Like, is there something? Because right now I'm just hearing Gretchen is absurd, right? That's what I'm hearing. And I'm not disagreeing because everything I hear is amazing. But what do you not want to see, right? Like, if you were like, oh no, please no. Like, but it sounds like there kind of isn't that, right? Like, we have a game against everything, so there really isn't something you kind of don't want to see. So that's kind of, I got to ask you guys.
I think Gretchen does at least tolerably well in just about every matchup. Things that I really don't enjoy are decks that can actually pressure you to die on turn 5 or 6, those super aggressive decks. Because Gretchen can win on turn 5 or 6 fairly consistently, under the assumption that you're not interacted with, but you're the combo deck. Someone's going to try to interact with you if you try to win that fast, typically. So those matchups can be a little scary. And hardcore control decks can also be really annoying, especially decks with, like, Armix in the command zone, since you can't actually counterspell the removal of Armix swinging. Can get really difficult if they're able to consistently remove all of your land untappers. That one's less of a problem because you have access to a Boro Breeze Color, so I don't mind that one as much because a Boro Breeze Color is just so absurd in those matchups because you just get a ramp and draw cards with Gretchen for so long and then you just kind of win. So control matchup isn't terribly difficult, but the super aggro decks are a lot more problematic, in my opinion. Bobby?
Yeah, sitting down across from multiple aggro decks. Aggro players like to team up and bully the combo players. It just is what it is, because then they can get down to good, clean, fair combat magic, which is the worst.
He
So,
gets it. He gets it.
but yeah, I mean, they can pressure you quickly. And Gretchen isn't gaining a ton of life, and it's creatures. Well, something like we talked about how they can match up well against certain decks, but if you're playing like Gut, for example, 4/1 skeletons with menace are not fun to be facing down, or 6/3 or whatever with inspiring leader out. They're even less fun to be staring down. So multiple aggressive decks are not very fun. I haven't played against too many control decks yet, but I imagine I would echo Dallas's sentiment there. I kind of just want to sit down across from a bunch of combo decks that are all trying to do things faster, so then I can just slide by. Or mid-range decks, because they're just kind of slower, and depending on their removal suite, we can fight through it.
Yeah, mid-range can be problematic, but I like mid-range in general because you still have that mid-game plan and you can still win fast if you need. So I don't mind mid-range too much.
Just having more mana is a huge difference on the turn you're going off. We have so much extra mana if you have multiple untappers with multiple auras on lands. You can interact a lot more than someone who's playing, an Orzhov mid-range deck that, they may play a handful of rocks and they just play their land drops every turn. We can have 14 mana on turn 5 and be able to go for a combo and have 4 pieces of interaction up to stop, people trying to stop us. So that is a huge benefit when it comes down to protecting the combo and interacting with other people.
So let me ask you this there, Bobby. I gotta ask you this, because I already know Dallas here. He does a great thing. You could find him in the Common Connoisseurs Discord. I'm gonna throw that out there. Puzzle plays this deck into the ground, just like I do with certain decks. I mean, Jesus. Dallas Puzzle, we could call him all the words, right? All the names. He's going to play Gretchen, and he's going to make sure you understand what this deck does. Bobby, are you going to start playing this deck in the Discord?
I'll probably play it here and there. I'm a little concerned now that Dallas and I have both won a tournament that it might have a target on its head. I don't know if that's true or not. We'll see. But I think I'll play it more for sure. I am like several other people, yourself, I like tinkering with lots of different decks at all times. So I very rarely play the same deck back-to-back games. Fortunately or unfortunately, I definitely am going to play with it more. There's a few things Dallas and I have been talking about tinkering with and trying out in the deck. So I'm going to want to get some reps in to test those out.
You can tell him, Bobby. I know it's on your mind. You can tell him.
Oh no! Don't tell me. Don't. What are we doing? What are we doing?
We're playing the smash hit, or we're gonna try playing the smash hit title bore, of Padiova notoriety, to enable a few extra combo lines in the deck. So.
So we're going all in. We're going all in. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
The Turbo Gretchen is coming.
Right.
Get ready.
We're going. This is so I'm getting bullied by you two. This is not fair. I don't feel I'm singled out here. Like, what is happening? But well, I mean that those. Oh, you guys are mean. You guys are mean. Nah, you guys aren't mean. You guys are great. I mean, let's start closing this out, you guys. I think this has been fantastic. I mean, I have enjoyed what both of you have been saying here. I think this has been very helpful to the community as a whole. Like hearing it from you both, right? Like I have the pleasure of being here with, between the two of you guys and hearing it from, one of the originators of the deck and, another individual that has played this deck to another win, right? Like, this is so fantastic to hear things like that. Like,
You can just call me a moocher. It's fine. I get it.
whoa, what are we
Nah,
doing?
bro, you put in the time.
Whoa,
You got there.
yes. So, you said it, Dallas, yourself. It sounds like you put in the time, and I don't want to say it sounds like it. You 100%. You put the time in for the deck. You did the work. You spoke to a specific individual. I'm not going to say any names. Puzzle. It's not your name, right?
That's not my name.
Yeah, I mean, it's not your name technically, right? So I got this. And you did the work, right? Like, if your homework is completed, you get an A at the end of the day, right? And you did the homework, and it sounds like you were rewarded for it. And the environment that was provided for you was amazing as well. Like, the CPDH community was very, very positive, which that's what makes the event as a whole positive for all of us, right? Like, this is what's going to make our format succeed, that you want to go back and play again. In fact, I did not ask that. Do you want to play another event? How about that one?
Definitely. And shout out goes to Dallas Walker for putting on the tournament too. We haven't thrown that out there yet, but that was the second one. And it was awesome. It ran smoothly. It was cool. I know I've been trying to push for some more tournaments because I think it's awesome. That's kind of the end goal of a competitive format. You want to play tournaments. So I know there's one coming up in Michigan in Paper 2 here in June, which will be cool. But yeah, no, I love it. So
That is fantastic. So, Puzzle, would you like to close us out? Any last questions for Bobby, or like what do you got for us?
I think that covers it for me. Thank you for coming on to talk with us today, Bobby. It was great to talk with you and get another Gretchen player on my side here. Everyone who's watching, thank you guys. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them below and give us a follow. Subscribe if you're not already. And we'll see y'all next time.